The courtroom smelled like floor wax and stale air. Nora Vance sat in a wooden chair while the judge read the settlement through a microphone that made his voice sound like it was coming through a tin can. Marcus wasn't there. He'd sent his attorney, a man named Pruitt in a charcoal suit who kept checking his watch. Pruitt slid a single sheet across the table. This is the asset schedule. The Linden Street property, the vehicles, the retirement accounts, and the investment portfolio remain with Mr. Vance. You retain the Ford pickup, your personal effects, and the real property located on Birch Creek Road, Ravalli County. The real property. That was what they called her father's airstrip, a narrow ribbon of land with a tin shack and an airplane she hadn't seen in over 12 years. Sitting at the end of a gravel road, she could barely remember how to find. Marcus's lawyers had appraised it at $4,000 and let her keep it without a fight. A rounding error on his balance sheet. Nora lifted the cardboard box from under the table. Inside were the things Marcus had left on the kitchen counter for her to collect. A jewelry box her mother had given her. A photo album from when their daughter Paige was small. A coffee mug that said "World's Best Mom" with a chip on the rim. 19 years of marriage, and this was what fit in a single box. She carried it out to the parking lot. The pickup was a 2004 model with 160,000 miles, a cracked dashboard, and a passenger door that wouldn't open from the outside. Marcus had bought it for a landscaper who quit after 2 weeks. It sat in their driveway for years until Nora started using it for errands. When the divorce was final, he told his lawyer she could keep it. Generous. Nora sat behind the wheel for a long time. She had nowhere to go. The house on Linden Street was Marcus's now. She had no apartment, no job. The accounting firm where she'd worked for 22 years had been bought out and cut her in February, the same week she filed for divorce. She had no friends who weren't really Marcus's friends. $211 in an account that would soon carry only her name. She pulled the deed out of the manila folder on the passenger seat. The paper was old, creased from sitting in a file cabinet at the county clerk's office. Vance Private Airfield, Birch Creek Road, Ravalli County. Conveyed to Nora Ann Vance under the last will and testament of Walter Robert Vance, deceased. Her father had left her the airstrip 12 years ago. She'd driven down for the funeral, spent 3 days sorting through his things, then locked the door and never went back. Marcus had said the place wasn't worth the property tax. Nora hadn't argued. She never argued with Marcus about money, about decisions, about anything. That was the deal, though nobody ever said it out loud. She turned the key. The engine caught on the third try, coughed twice, and settled into a rough idle. She pulled out of the courthouse lot and pointed the truck north toward the mountains. The drive took the better part of 6 hours. Interstate bled into 2-lane highway, then county road, then Birch Creek. A strip of cracked asphalt that climbed into the Bitterroots through tunnels of pine and aspen. The leaves had just started to turn, edges of copper and gold bleeding through the green. Nora cracked the window. The mountain air smelled like damp leaves and wood smoke, and underneath that, something older. Rock and soil and time. She remembered this road from summers as a girl. Her mother would drop her at the airstrip in June and pick her up in August. 2 months with Walter, learning to pump avgas, to read a fuel gauge, to listen to an engine and hear what was wrong inside it. By the time she was 12, she could change a fan belt and preflight a wing. At 19, her father sat in the right seat and watched her earn her private pilot's license on a clear October morning. He said nothing the whole flight. Then, on the ground, he put one hand on her shoulder and said, "You fly like you mean it." Marcus found that charming when they first dated. Later, he found it embarrassing. A real estate developer's wife who knew her way around a carburetor and could land a bush plane on a gravel bar. He never told her to stop. He just stopped asking about it, and eventually she stopped doing it. The way you stop anything when the person closest to you pretends it doesn't exist. Her license lapsed. Her logbook went into a drawer. She hadn't touched a yoke in 17 years. Birch Creek Road curved around a granite outcrop, and there it was. The airstrip was smaller than she remembered. Maybe 800 yards of grass, gone yellow with late autumn. hemmed by pines, so close it looked like a green scar cut into the mountain. At the far end, under a tin lean-to that had collapsed on one corner, sat the airplane, a de Havilland Beaver. The kind of rugged bush plane her father had flown her whole life. Its skin had once been white and forest green. Now it was the color of ash, streaked with rust that ran down from the rivets like old tears. One tire had gone flat, tilting the whole aircraft to the side like a tired animal kneeling down. Vines had climbed the wing and threaded through the gap in the cockpit door. The windshield was cracked corner to corner. The tail number N1842V was still legible, though most of the paint had peeled away. But the airframe was whole. Nora tried the cargo door. It stuck, then gave with the long shriek of a hinge that hadn't moved in a decade. Inside, the air was thick and still, heavy with dust. Late afternoon light came through the dirty windows in pale rectangles across the metal floor. The pilot seat was still there, the leather cracked and sunken. Every needle on the instrument panel was dead, frozen on numbers from another decade. And in one corner, hanging from a rusted hook, was her father's canvas flight jacket. The same one, the same dark oil stain on the right elbow that she remembered. Nora stood there a long time. She had come to sell the place. She had braced herself to see a pile of scrap. What she had not braced for was the feeling that her father had just stepped out and would be back any minute. The courtroom smelled like floor wax and old paper. The judge's voice came through a microphone that buzzed on every consonant. Nora sat at a table with her lawyer, a legal aid woman who'd been assigned to her case and whose name she kept forgetting. Marcus wasn't there. He'd sent Attorney Pruitt, a man in a charcoal suit who checked his watch every few minutes, as if the dissolution of a 19-year marriage was keeping him from something important. 4 signatures, 2 initials, and the marriage was reduced to a manila folder. Pruitt slid a single sheet of paper across the table. The asset schedule. Linden Street House, Marcus. Vehicles, Marcus. Retirement accounts, Marcus. Investment portfolio, Marcus. And then, at the bottom, in the kind of small print that says the lawyers barely bothered, Nora gets the Ford pickup, her personal effects, and the real property located on Birch Creek Road, Ravalli County, appraised at $4,000. $4,000. Marcus's lawyers didn't even contest it. It was a rounding error. A line item so worthless they let it slide just to close the file. When Nora got back to the house that was no longer hers, there was a cardboard box on the kitchen counter. Marcus had left it there. Inside, a jewelry box that had belonged to her mother, a photo album of Paige as a child, gap-toothed and laughing, a chipped coffee mug that read World's Best Mom, 19 years of marriage. It fit in one box. The Ford was a 2004 model with 160,000 miles. The dashboard was cracked. The passenger door wouldn't open from the outside. Marcus had bought it for a landscaper who quit after 2 weeks. He told his lawyer she could keep it. Generous. Nora sat behind the wheel. She had nowhere to go. The house was gone. No apartment, no job. The accounting firm had been bought out and cut her in February, the same week she filed. No friends who weren't really Marcus's friends. $211 in an account that was about to carry only her name. She found the deed in the glove compartment. Old paper, creased from a county clerk's file cabinet. Vance Private Airfield, Birch Creek Road, Ravalli County, conveyed to Nora Ann Vance under the last will and testament of Walter Robert Vance, deceased. Her father had left it to her 12 years ago. She'd driven down for the funeral, spent 3 days sorting his things, locked the door, and never went back. Marcus said the place wasn't worth the property tax. Nora never argued. She never argued with Marcus about anything. The engine caught on the 3rd try, coughed twice, settled into a rough idle. She pointed the truck north, toward the Bitter Roots. The interstate gave way to a 2-lane highway, which turned into a county road, which narrowed into Birch Creek Road, a strip of cracked asphalt climbing into the Bitter Roots through tunnels of pine and aspen. The leaves were just beginning to turn, edges of copper and gold bleeding through the green. Nora cracked the window. The mountain air smelled like damp leaves and wood smoke, and underneath that, something older. Rock and soil and time. She hadn't been up here in 12 years. Not since the funeral. But the road remembered. Her hands remembered the turns before her mind caught up. The airstrip came into view around a granite outcrop, smaller than she remembered. 800 yards of grass gone yellow with late autumn, hemmed in by pine so close it looked like a green scar cut into the mountain. At the far end, under a tin lean-to that had collapsed on one corner, sat the airplane, a de Havilland Beaver. The skin had once been white and forest green. Now, it was ash-colored, streaked with rust running down from the rivets like old tears. One tire was flat, tilting the whole aircraft sideways like a tired animal kneeling. Vines climbed the wing, threading through the gap in the cockpit door. The windshield was cracked corner to corner. The tail number N1842V was still legible, though most of the paint had peeled away. But the airframe was whole. Nora tried the cargo door. It stuck. Then it gave way with the long shriek of a hinge that hadn't moved in a decade. Inside, the air was thick and still, heavy with dust. Late afternoon, light pushed through dirty windows in pale rectangles across the metal floor. The pilot's seat was leather, cracked and sunken. Every needle on the instrument panel was dead, frozen on numbers from another decade. And in one corner, hanging from a rusted hook, her father's canvas flight jacket. The same dark oil stain on the right elbow, she remembered. She stood there a long time. She had come to sell the place. She had braced herself to see a pile of scrap. What she hadn't braced for was the feeling that her father had just stepped out and would be back any minute. That jacket was still here. It wasn't left behind by accident. He had hung it there himself, the last time he walked out of this airplane, and he had never come back to get it. The first night in the shack, Nora lay down on her father's cot. The room was small, a propane stove, a wooden table, a wall of tools arranged with a kind of devotion, and on one wall, a topographic map of the whole valley. It was dense with pencil marks, small circles, numbers, initials she was too tired to understand. She lay there, in the smell of motor oil and pine, and something it took her a while to place, the smell of her father. Next morning, a man appeared at the head of the strip, about 70, lean and weathered. Faded flannel, a ball cap from an aircraft parts company that didn't exist anymore. He walked slowly up the grass, stopped about 10 paces from Nora, and took off his hat. "You're Walt's girl." Not a question. Nora said she knew who he was. He looked at the airplane a long moment, then back at her. Hollis stayed. "Your father and I flew this country together near on 40 years. I heard you came back. News moves fast in a small valley, even when there's hardly anyone to carry it." He asked what she meant to do. She told him the truth. Sell. He nodded slowly, the way a man nods at an answer he's been expecting and dreading. "Somebody will come to buy it, sooner than you think. When they do, you call me before you sign a thing." He set a scrap of paper on the hood of the Ford, a phone number in a shaky hand. He turned to go, paused, said without looking back, "He never told you, did he, what he did out here?" Nora said, "My father pumped gas and fixed engines." Hollis was quiet a long while. "Yeah," he said at last, "he did that too." And he walked off down the gravel road. Nora watched him go, her chest tight for a reason she couldn't name. She cleaned for 2 days. Not because she'd decided to stay. She told herself she was just making it presentable, getting a better price. But every time she picked up the phone to call a realtor, her hands put it back down. She started with the shack, swept dust off the floor, thick as felt, washed the windows until morning light came through clean instead of gray, found a jug of water she'd forgotten, and a bag of coffee that had turned to stone made a pot anyway in an old enamel kettle. The smell of coffee and warm pine filled the room. The shack stopped feeling like a tomb. Then the airplane. She aired up the flat tire with the old compressor it coughed, clattered, and finally agreed to run. Scraped rust off the door hinges, oiled them until the cargo door swung open smooth again. pulled vines off the wing one strand at a time, thorns raking thin red lines across the backs of her hands, wiped down the instrument panel and the cracked leather seats with a rag and a half-used can of polish from the shelf. The work was hard. Her back ached. Her fingernails went black with grease. But there was something in working with her hands that quieted her mind. Something 19 years in the house on Linden Street had never once given her. By the afternoon of the second day, she crawled into the belly of the plane to clean the floor. Her knee struck something. A metal panel beneath the last row of seats. It didn't match the rest. The dust on it was thinner than everywhere else, like hands had touched it many times. 4 screws at the corners. Their heads were worn smooth from being turned out and back in too often to count. Nora sat very still. Her heart beat faster than the work could account for. She found the screwdriver in the toolkit. The 4 screws came out easily. The panel lifted with a soft scrape of metal. Beneath it, a shallow compartment, lined with oilcloth against the damp. Inside, a leather-bound logbook, thick, edges frayed, an old cookie tin, lid pressed shut. A bundle of letters tied with twine so thick the twine had stretched, and a green ledger, the kind of accounting book Nora had worked with for 22 years. Except this one was like nothing she'd ever seen. Nora took out the logbook first. She opened it in the slanting light from the window, the pages brittle and soft at the edges. Her father's careful block capitals filled every line the same hand she remembered from birthday cards and notes left on the kitchen table. But these were not ordinary flights. January 14. Pruitt girl, fever of 104, pass iced shut. Night flight to Missoula Hospital. Landed 2:40 a.m. She lived. February 3. Dropped 3 bales of hay and a sack of flour to the Okafor place. Snowed in 8 days. Poor visibility. Came in low over Birch Creek. November 15. Found the Reyes father and son lost on Sapphire Pass. Spotted smoke at dusk. Gave coordinates to the rescue team. Both alive. Page after page. 40 years. Hundreds of flights. Each one a human being. And each entry ended with the same word. Repeated like a prayer. Lived. And beside most of them in the margin, a small mark, a minus sign, then a 0. Charged nothing. Not 1 cent. Nora sank down on the floor of the airplane, the logbook open in her lap. And for the first time since she walked out of that courtroom, she cried. Not for what she lost, but for the man who raised her. The man she now understood she never truly knew. She opened the green ledger next. It didn't track money in and money out like a real account book. It tracked people. Left column. Names: Pruitt, Okafor, Reyes, Halloran, Begay. Hundreds of names. Right column, where the amount owed should go, held a single phrase repeated over and over. Paid in full. She understood then. Her father counted every life saved as a debt settled. Not that they owed him, but that he believed his own life had been paid back square every time he set those wheels down and a human being was still breathing. She opened the cookie tin last. Photographs. A girl in a graduation cap. A family in front of a brand new cabin. An old man grinning beside a milk cow. And a sheet of paper folded in quarters in her father's hand, dated only a few weeks before he died. The letter read, Nora, if you found this, it means you came back. I always knew you would. I never told you because I didn't want you to see it as a burden. It isn't a burden. It's the thing that keeps this valley alive. You don't have to carry it on. But if one day you want to, everything you need is right here. Dad. She read it over and over until the light failed, and she had to light the oil lamp to see the words. And what she had in her hands now was not just a record of the past. It was a call one the valley itself was about to answer. Subscribe. Because the people her father saved are already on their way to her door, and what they bring will change everything. The news moved through the valley the way mountain weather does, fast, quiet, and impossible to stop. By the end of the first week, they started coming. The first one was a woman about 60, Della Pruitt, driving a small truck with a basket of eggs riding on the passenger seat. She pulled up at the head of the strip and just stood there, staring at the airplane. Her hand was tight on the basket handle, white-knuckled tight. "You don't know me," she said. "But I know this plane." She was 8 years old when scarlet fever put her into convulsions in the middle of a January night. The pass was iced solid. Her daddy made one phone call, and Walter Vance landed this airplane on a snow-covered strip, picked her up, and flew her to Missoula. The doctor said 1 hour later and she'd have been gone. She set the basket down in the grass. "I brought him eggs every month until the day he died. I kept bringing them up here, even with no one to take them. I figured now there's you." Nora picked up the basket. She couldn't say a word. The next day, Sam Okafor arrived with a trailer of cut firewood. He didn't introduce himself. He just started unloading. "Your father dropped hay to my cattle the winter they were snowed in. If he hadn't, I'd have lost the whole herd and the ranch with it. I owe him. I know he'd say I don't, but I know I do." He stacked the wood beside the shack without asking. "Winter's coming. You'll want this." They kept coming. A retired mechanic named Begay showed up and rebuilt the compressor. Took no pay. A young woman named Marisol left a pot of stew on the step, still warm. A 21-year-old named Travis Halloran rode his bicycle up almost every day and just stood there, looking at the airplane with an expression. Nora recognized the look of someone who wants to learn a thing and doesn't know how to ask. One afternoon, he told her why. "My father flew searches for my brother once. He got lost on Sapphire Pass the fall I was 10. Mr. Vance found him by a wisp of smoke at dusk. I always wanted to know how this airplane worked." Nora looked at him a long moment. Then she opened the cargo door. "Come on, then. I'll show you." In the evenings, Hollis Dade came by. He sat on an upturned oil drum, drank her coffee, and told her the things the logbook didn't record. The nights her father flew into weather no one had asked him to fly into. The way he never let any family know whose hand had dropped the hay, paid the pharmacy bill, fixed the broken tractor in the dark. "Kindness that has to be seen," Hollis said. The lamplight catching the lines of his face isn't kindness anymore. It's a transaction. Nora began to understand why her father never told her. He hadn't hidden it out of shame. He'd hidden it because to him, a good thing kept its value only as long as it stayed quiet. She stopped thinking about selling. She didn't say so out loud, not even to herself. But she stopped picking up the phone to call the realtor. She started making a list of parts she'd need to make the Beaver fly again. She wrote to the Aviation Authority about the steps to bring an old aircraft back to airworthy. She didn't know what she was doing or why. She only knew that for the first time in years, she woke each morning with something that needed doing and a reason to do it. Monday of the third week, a black SUV turned onto Birch Creek Road. It was so clean it didn't belong on the gravel. No dust, no mud, like it had been lowered onto the road from a different world. It stopped in front of the shack. The man who got out was about 50, in a gray cashmere coat and shoes that had never touched dirt. He smiled with teeth too white, put out his hand, and said his name like a man used to being listened to. "Royce Lambert, ideal in classic aircraft. And I believe, Mrs. Vance, that you and I can help each other a great deal." He walked around the Beaver like a man inspecting a racehorse, tapping the skin, cocking his head at the tail number. His smile widened with every step. "Do you have any idea what you're sitting on? This is a 1958 de Havilland Beaver. Original airframe, low serial number. There are 3 collectors on the East Coast who would fight each other for this. Restored. It's worth $500,000. Maybe more." He turned back to her. "I'm prepared to offer you $40,000 cash this week. Look around you. You can't restore this. $40,000 is a fresh start, Mrs. Vance. A very generous one, 10 times the figure on the asset schedule. With $211 in her account, it was a lifeline. Nora felt the number pull at her. For 19 years, she had learned to say yes to confident men in expensive coats. "Let me think about it," she said. "Don't think too long," Royce said, still smiling. Offers like this don't sit around. He set a business card on the hood of the Ford, right next to where Hollis had left his number. 2 scraps of paper lay side by side. Nora looked at them a long while after the black SUV disappeared behind the granite outcrop. She called Hollis that night. He was there within half an hour. When he heard the name Royce Lambert, his face darkened. He's not here for the airplane. He's here because the airplane is the cheapest thing he can pry loose right now. Do you know what this land is worth? You've got a level strip, a creek, 800 yards of frontage along Birch Creek. There's a resort company that's wanted to build down this valley for years. They need an airstrip to fly the rich folks in. Lambert's their front man. He buys the plane cheap, and that gives him a reason to make an offer on the land. Your father turned them down 3 times in the last 10 years of his life. They waited him out. Now they're waiting on you. Nora felt something go cold in her chest. I'm not selling the land. You say that now, Hollis said gently. But he'll be back. And he won't stop at a generous offer. Hollis was right. The next week, a letter arrived from a law office in Bozeman. It cited an unpaid maintenance and hangar storage debt supposedly owed against the aircraft. Attached was a copy of a contract bearing what was meant to look like Walter Vance's signature, arguing the Beaver had been pledged as collateral and was therefore subject to repossession and sale. The debt on the letter: $63,000, more than the cash offer to buy it outright. A trap. Nora could either sell the plane cheap or lose it altogether in court. A legal con, sleek and cold. Royce Lambert was using money and lawyers to squeeze a woman who just got divorced, had no job, and had $211 to her name until she let go of the only thing she had left. Nora sat in the dark shack that night. The letter on the table, the oil lamp guttering. For 19 years she had learned how to let go her career when Marcus said it didn't matter, the things she loved when he found them embarrassing. Her own voice. She was world-class at saying yes and quietly accepting whatever came. But her hands did not shake when she opened the green ledger one more time. Nora was an accountant. 22 years of her life spent reading documents, reconciling figures, finding the one place where a story on paper didn't match the truth. Marcus had never once asked her about that work. He never saw it as anything worth knowing. Now, that work was her weapon. She started with the forged signature, laid the fraudulent contract beside her father's logbook and the real letters from the cookie tin, and she saw it at once. Her father's block capitals always leaned to the right. His R in Robert had a distinctive upward flick at the end. The signature on the contract stood straight and stiff. The R had no flick at all. A forgery, plain as anything. She photographed every page, every detail. Then she drove 6 hours back to the county clerk's office and pulled the full legal history of the property. She found 3 letters of refusal her father had written to the resort company over a decade, declining offers that climbed higher every time. She found his will, properly notarized, stating plainly that the land was left to his daughter with the wish that it continue to serve the valley, not be sold off. And she found one thing even Hollis didn't know. In the last years of his life, her father had placed the entire parcel into a permanent conservation easement with a local land trust, a binding agreement. The strip could never be commercially developed. The resort could never be built here. Royce Lambert knew this. It's why he needed the airplane. Since he couldn't have the land, he turned to the one thing he still might take. But now Nora had all of it. The forged contract, the real logbook, the will, the easement, and 40 years of names in the green ledger. 40 years of living witnesses. She didn't hire an expensive lawyer. She didn't have the money. Instead, she did what her father would have done. She called the whole valley. They gathered at the shack on a Saturday afternoon. Della Pruitt, saved at 8 years old. Sam Okafor, whose herd was saved. The Reyes family, found on Sapphire Pass. Begay, Marisol, Travis. More than 30 people, each one carrying a story, a photograph, a letter her father once wrote, a memory of the night the Beaver came down and saved something they thought was lost. Nora wrote it all down. She built a record, not an accountant's record, but a record of a man and a valley. When Royce Lambert came back with his lawyer, expecting a woman alone and desperate, what he found was a woman sitting behind her father's wooden table with a thick file, 30 witnesses standing behind her, and a voice that did not shake. "This signature is forged," Nora said. She laid the handwriting analysis on the table. "I've filed a criminal complaint for document fraud. This land is under a permanent conservation easement. You knew that, which is why you came after the airplane instead. And this airplane," she pushed the logbook across the table, "is not scrap. It is not your $500,000 collector's piece. It saved 142 human lives in 40 years. I have every one of their names. You want to take me to court for it? Go ahead. But you'll have to explain to a jury in this valley why you forged a dead man's signature to steal the airplane that once saved their own children." Royce Lambert opened his mouth, then closed it. His bright white smile broke for the first time. He looked around the shack at 30 silent faces, at the green ledger with its 142 names, at the woman he had taken for a rounding error. And he understood the thing men like him always understand too late, that there are things that appear on no balance sheet, and that those are the very things that hold a community upright. His lawyer withdrew the letter. The lawsuit was gone within a week. The criminal complaint for fraud was not. Royce Lambert left the valley and never came back. Winter came to the valley in November, early, heavy, just like Sam Okafor warned. Snow whitened the grass strip. It built up in thick ridges along the beaver's wing. But by then, the airplane wasn't a heap of scrap under a collapsed roof anymore. It had taken nearly 2 months. Begay rebuilt the engine, took no pay, taught Travis every step while he worked. Hollis Dade sat on his upturned oil drum each afternoon, directing with a hoarse voice and 40 years of knowing. Della Pruitt brought eggs every week. Sam Okafor hauled in parts nobody asked the price of. Nora relearned everything her father taught her at 12. The sound of a healthy engine and the sound of a sick one. How to inspect a control surface under a flashlight. Her hands went black with grease again. This time, nobody on Earth told her it was something to be ashamed of. She didn't restore the beaver into a glossy showpiece to sell. She fixed it so it would fly. There's a difference. She understood that difference better than anyone. Royce Lambert looked at this airplane and saw $500,000. Her father looked at it and saw 142 human beings. Nora chose her father's way of seeing. She got current again as a pilot. Her old private license had lapsed in the years of her marriage, so she put in the hours, passed the written, flew a flight review with Hollis in the right seat the way her father once sat in the right seat and watched her earn it the first time. She flew until the day Hollis climbed out of the airplane, clapped her on the shoulder and said, "Walt would be proud. Not because you fly well, because you fly for the right reason." Then, on a night in December, the phone in the shack rang at 2 a.m. A family at the far end of the valley. A small child burning with fever. The pass iced shut. No ambulance could get through. Nora pulled on her father's canvas flight jacket. The same one. The same dark oil stain on the right elbow. And she flew N1842V into the snowbound dark. Came down on a strip she could barely see the landing lights, just 2 weak beams in the blowing snow. She carried the child to Missoula, landed at the hospital at 3:40 in the morning. The child lived. The next morning she opened her father's logbook to the first blank page, the line where 40 years of entries ended, and left the rest to her. She picked up the pencil. In her own hand, she wrote the first line. December 11. Coil boy, high fever, pass iced shut. Night flight to Missoula. Landed 3:40 a.m. She paused a long while. Then she wrote the last word. The word repeated for 40 years, like a prayer. Lived. And beside it in the margin, a minus sign and a 0. The next spring, the grass strip was green again. Travis Halloran showed up almost every day, 21 years old, asking questions the way Nora once asked her father, hungry, impatient, wanting to know how everything worked. She taught him to read an engine the way Walter had taught her, by listening, not looking, by knowing which sounds meant trouble and which ones meant nothing. One afternoon, after he'd rebuilt a magneto on his own for the first time, Travis said, "You're good at this. The teaching, I mean." Nora just smiled. It was exactly what her father had done for her, right here, a lifetime ago. Then in May, Paige came, Nora's daughter, 23, raised in the house on Linden Street. In the world Nora used to believe was her life. She stood at the head of the strip in clothes that were too clean for this place, looking at the airplane, at the shack, at her mother with grease under her nails, and a way of standing the girl had never seen. "I don't understand," Paige said. "Dad said this place was just some junk you inherited." Nora didn't answer with words. She took her daughter into the Beaver, lifted the panel beneath the last row of seats, 4 screws, oiled smooth now, and pulled out the logbook. She put it in Paige's hands. "Read." Paige read, page after page, hundreds of names, the same word over and over, lived, lived, lived. And when she reached the last entry, the one in her own mother's hand, from that December night her face changed. The way only the truth can change it. "Grandpa did all of this," Paige whispered, "and no one knew." "He didn't want anyone to know," Nora said. "He used to say that kindness that has to be seen isn't kindness anymore." Paige looked at her mother a long time. "Then why are you telling me?" Nora took her daughter's hand, the clean hand of a city girl inside the grease-marked hand of a woman who had found herself again. "Because there's a difference between showing off and passing on. He didn't tell me because he thought I'd see it as a burden. But it isn't a burden, Paige. It's the thing that keeps this valley alive." Paige didn't say anything, but she didn't let go of her mother's hand either. And that evening, she sat on the step of the shack and watched the sun go down over the bitterroots, and she didn't ask for a ride back to town. If this kind of story, quiet, real, earned, is something you want more of, subscribe. There are a few more like it waiting. And drop a comment. What's a thing someone passed on to you that you didn't understand the weight of until years later?